It's Christmas, and we're talking about some fun stuff here on Locked On Pacers. Pascal Siakam's All-Star candidacy with a new format. Does Tyrese Haliburton have any shot? Plus, important contract dates you need to know about. And Pacers not playing on Christmas again. Could they soon? We'll get to it all today on Locked On Pacers.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where I have a very festive shirt on, and we have a lot to discuss. I'm Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and I want to break down a lot of stuff that I've wanted to get to for a while. The new NBA All-Star format is out. I hate it, but Pascal Siakam has continued to play well, and I think has a decent shot of being named to the event. We'll talk a little bit about Tyrese Haliburton's chances as well. I want to talk about some important contract stuff coming up, one that I hinted at talking about and then forgot to a couple episodes ago. And then it's Christmas Day. There's fun games today. Love NBA on Christmas Day. Pacers aren't playing despite making the conference finals last year. A rare omission from the league to have that happen. I kind of get it, but when could they? Could they soon? And what does the slate this year say about their chances in the future? Probably a little shorter today because I'm out of town with family, but I always want to get you guys something every single day. You never know who's traveling. You never know who wants to listen to Pacers stuff. I want to listen to Pacers stuff on Christmas Day. Hope you guys are having a great and safe holiday. Let's talk about the All-Star game again. Early November, mid-November, I talked about Siakam's early season All-Star candidacy. He was playing that well, was the best player for the Pacers by far at the time. And a lot of the arbitrary stat cutoffs I used then still apply today. Siakam currently averaging over 20 points, exactly 7 boards, and just under 3.4 assists per game. Phenomenal year, despite his passing numbers being down from past seasons. Those stats are fantastic, and we'll get to that, why I think he has such a solid shot now in a second. But the new format, man, do you guys know about this? If you haven't read, the NBA trying new things, right? They tried stuff in Indy last year with a more traditional All-Star game. It stunk. This year they're trying a tournament, I guess, with losers more often, and the chance of losing to rising stars, maybe guys will really try. If you don't know, the format is the 24 All-Stars, the 12 from each conference. They'll get split into 3 teams of 8. And then a 4th team of 8 will join them. And that 4th team of 8 will be the winner of the Rising Stars Challenge. So first and second year players for a mini tournament. So for those 4 teams, will make a little bracket. They'll play to 40 in a target score. I suppose the shame of losing to a Rising Stars team could be a boost to making things more competitive. Not thinking this is going to be the answer. I'm not a fan of this format. I do get why the NBA is trying new things. Seems like a lot of players in the league are kind of like, what is this? We'll see where this goes. Just go back to East-West, let guys wear their home team's jerseys. And if Pascal Siakam makes it, that would mean he'd be wearing a Pacers uniform. I talked about this case earlier in the season, and I'll do it again, right? The guys in the league right now averaging his stats. So these are very arbitrary cutoffs because they're literally just Siakam stats, but over 20 points a game, over or equal to 7 rebounds a game, and over 3.3 assists per game. Here's the list. It's 13 guys. Nikola Jokic, Domantas Sabonis, Karl Anthony Towns, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jason Tatum, Anthony Davis, Luka Doncic, Pascal Siakam, Victor Wembanyama, LeBron James, Cade Cunningham, Paolo Banchero, and Zion Williamson. The last 2 of those 13 names, Paolo Banchero and Zion Williamson, have played 11 games combined, 5 for Paolo and 6 for Zion. So there's really 11 guys who have played real time and have an actual chance at being an all-star who are doing what Siakam's doing. And that's the whole league. That's not even just the East, right? You look at just the East, you got Cade, Siakam, Tatum, Giannis, Towns. 5 guys, right? You could argue that Siakam's one of the most productive players in the league this year. And in that group of players I just said, he's definitely not the best defender. That's definitely Giannis and Anthony Davis and Victor. But he's among the better of the defenders in that group, right? That is just stats. If you watch the Pacers play, you know Siakam's importance just from a size perspective. And when they just played Phoenix, I said it right after the game. You saw it on the broadcast. Kevin Durant, of all people, was like, yeah, Siakam is really good. And they had a huge dap, huge handshake. You can tell by Kevin Durant's mannerisms who he really respects, right? And him and Siakam, they battled in the finals in 2019. Big respect there. And Kevin Durant post-game really talked about Siakam and how he called him an all-star and said he's played like that since that finals year. He thinks he's gotten a lot of confidence that gets him to that level. I think you're seeing it this year, right? Siakam has been massive for the Pacers. In so many games, he's been their best player. He's certainly been their most consistent performer. and among the best players in the league this year in terms of his statistical production. He doesn't have that like takeover star ability that makes you an all-star. The thing holding him back just by using those statistical thresholds is honestly his consistency and in a negative way. He has no 30-point games this year, right? Like when you think of all-stars or stars, you think of that kind of player, the takeover monster. And Siakam did take over in Phoenix recently because he had 18 rebounds and he took over against the Celtics because he was super clutch and efficient all night, but didn't reach 30 points in either of those games, right? But he's never been below 14, right? He never has bad nights. I think he's only been under 30 or 40% shooting like 3 times all season, right? He's been so consistent for the Pacers. They honestly go away from him in the second half a little too often for various reasons. So that could be holding him back a little bit. He never has the like, whoa kind of game, but that consistency has been what's made him so good, right? They can count on getting that level of player every night. He's been an all-star twice for a reason. In the past, his playmaking numbers have been certainly higher than this, right? Of the guys I just said, the stat that's the hardest to get Siakam onto the list for is those assists, right? Of everybody in that club I mentioned earlier, he is averaging the fewest assists per game. Kat and Victor are the only other guys below 4, but they're a little bit ahead of Siakam. In the rebounding department, him and Cade are pretty close to the cutoff. But in general, that level of production is hard to hit. There's a reason that list is full of just absolute studs and some MVP candidates, right? And so between that and the fact that the East does not have as many of those guys, and one of them won't make it because he's only played 5 games, I think he's got a shot. Now, here's what's changed. As I said early in the season, I predicted what stats would and would not hold. I actually thought assists had a better chance of holding because he was averaging more assists the first time I did this exercise than now, but I didn't know if the scoring would hold because of his shooting. He's kept shooting it pretty well this season, which has been really big for him to be at 42% from deep. In fact, of everybody I've talked about on this list, that is the 3rd best 3-point percentage. Only Kat and fourth best. Only Kat, Sabonis, and Jokic are higher in terms of 3-point percentage, right? So the efficiency comes from that as well. The assists have gone down. They haven't really asked him to play make as much on a team with all these guards. I get it, but remarkably huge for the Pacers. I think Siakam's got a shot. The other thing that's changed is they're surging right now. And I think that his first impression was good. And if the Pacers remain in this, looks like, by the time All-Star voting is done by fans, Siakam will be somewhere, or the Pacers will be somewhere between 8 and 6, maybe 9th in the East, depending on Brooklyn and Detroit's level. If they stay in the top 8, I think people will seriously consider them for one All-Star, and Siakam's been their best player. Their record being where it is now, instead of where it could have been had they struggled on this road trip or had another down stretch, that would have really hurt them, right? Like that might hurt Cade's case. The Pistons are not particularly good, or someone on worse teams than the ones we're talking about. Like the Sixers, for example, are going to have trouble with all-stars, although they've had so many injuries. So I think that has helped the Pacers a lot, is that they're back to 500 and at least relevant at Christmas time. And they'll be mostly in the mix and relevant for the voting period, right? Even if they stumble in these next 5 games that are pretty tough, they've shown they have a level good enough now to keep something close to a respectable record going into the end of the voting. And I think it's possible now that Siakam has a shot. Haliburton obviously is going to be doomed by him not playing well at times early in the season. There's a couple factors with that, though. I talk about Jeff Teague a lot with this. First impressions matter so much. People get so anchored to their first impression in seasons, which is stupid. But like Jeff Teague, the year he played for the Pacers, he was really rough like the first 8 or 10 games. And it was pretty good the last 70. But for some reason, that first impression of his first 10 games really made people feel like he just kind of had a pedestrian season here. And I thought he was pretty good. Tyrese was bad at the start of the year. And if you want to have a perception about your season, that's about the worst possible time to have it, right? He's 5th in the NBA in assists per game right now. The guys above him are LeBron, Jokic, Cade, and Trey. They're all going to be all-stars this year, right? He is the lowest scoring player among those guys. And again, this is not a good Tyrese Haliburton season, especially by his standards. He's 26th in offensive BPM, still very impactful, still gets a lot of respect, but that's outside the top 24. And that does obviously, include a very poor stretch to start the season. Like he's probably in if you had to rank the best East players in like the 20 to 30 range this year, which is too far away even for injury replacement. But I'm not ruling it out. If he has a really heater stretch from now until the voting ends, right? If he looks just sensational, which is possible. We've seen Tyrese Haliburton heaters before, then maybe, right? But I think he's probably dug his own grave with his early season. But I mean, the last month, I'll go a month plus a day. So I'm talking on the 24th. So really a month plus 2 days. Since November 22nd, we're talking about a 15-game Tyrese Haliburton sample, 20.2 points, 9.1 assists on 49, 41, 87 splits. That's pretty close statistically to what he finished last year at, and pretty close statistically to what he finished 2 years ago at. I bring up 2 years ago because that last year he had a really high peak that helped him be an all-star. 2 years ago, he was pretty much that kind of player all season. He was one of the last all-stars who did make it, right? So his recent level is probably pretty close to all-star, but the first impression, and rightfully so, should hold him down. The first 15 games were way, way worse than those numbers. In fact, that 15 is exactly half the Pacers games, which is convenient for this exercise. So the Haliburton has a very weak case right now. Siakam's is very strong. But if the Pacers, let's say, play really well for the next month and they're over 500 and they're 5 or 6 in the East, and Haliburton continues to play at that level I just described, maybe even a little higher than that, then I think he'll get some real like, hey, maybe this guy should make it. Like, he's still the engine for a pretty good team. But as of right now, I think Siakam's got the best shot of the Pacers by far, and I think their record's going to matter. And the East field's really interesting this year just because there's been so many, like a lot of the stars have been in and out. The East kind of stinks. It's just a wobbly conference. So Siakam's definitely got a shot. And I hate for him that if he makes it, he'll have to play in this goofy format that kind of stinks, but he would deserve it if he makes it. He's been just sensational so many times for the Pacers this season. Let's pivot. Let's talk some contract stuff. I had some stuff I wanted to bring up last week and is now even more interesting a week later for various reasons, and some other stuff, 10-day contracts, guarantees, all that with James Johnson that we need to get to on today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do any of that, though, need to talk to you guys about two great groups of people. First up, Game Time, the best place to get tickets for comedy, theater, music, sports, whatever you're going to near you. They're focused on togetherness this holiday season. When you bring people together at live events, the experience is much better. It's a great gift if you're still celebrating Christmas later this year. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. They filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. But if you do, you will find so many great features on Game Time to make it worth sifting through. They have curated deals to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. They have super deals. They have seat views in the venue before you buy. Their lowest price guaranteed. They have event cancellation protection. So many great things. I used it to go watch the New York Liberty and Barclays Center, and it was amazing. It took the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can do so too with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Also, let's talk about Rocket Money. Want to save money? Well, Rocket Money can help you find any subscriptions you forgot about that you maybe been paying for twice or been paying for a while and get rid of them. A few subscriptions you don't even realize you're paying for, Rocket Money will track them down, and it's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app. It helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place: subscriptions, spending habits, even goals you want to hit this year. They have over 5 million users and have saved them a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year with all their premium features like that subscription tracker. Cancel services you're not using, and you can save a ton that way. They have a goals feature to automatically set aside money for your future. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockdown today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockdown. One more time, rocketmoney.com/lockdown. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day on this Christmas day. Fun games on the slate. If you want to hear more about what I think will happen, and it just happens to be the morning for you, Locked On NBA with Wes Goldberg. It's him and I talking about the Christmas slate, games we like, players we like, stuff that we'll be watching out for. Love Christmas Day in the NBA or any of our other Locked On podcasts with the individual teams playing on Christmas Day. Let's talk some contract stuff. There was stuff I wanted to bring up last week that I failed to about the two-way players. There's an important date coming up early next month. 10-day contracts are available in 10 days, believe it or not. So lots of good and important stuff to break down here. First up, something just happened that was major for the Pacers in a very small way, and that was the G League Winter Showcase. You might be wondering, why is that important for the Pacers? They don't play in the G League. The Mad Ants were in the G League Winter Showcase. They played very well. Jahlil Okafor named to first team All Showcase. I think it was only one team, All Showcase team, and they went 2-0. But that's not the major thing that happened, although I did just write a story about Jahlil Okafor. The major thing that happened is all three Pacers two-way players were with the Mad Ants for both games. Finally, the Pacers are healthy enough that they can do this, right? Early in the NBA season, the G League hasn't started yet, so it's a lot easier to keep your 2A guys with the pro team. But once the G League started, the Pacers were losing guys. They had lost Nesmith, Nembhard, 2 backup centers already, so they needed Enrique Freeman a lot. And then they lost Ben Shepherd. They needed Quentin Jackson a lot, right? Rick Carlisle mentioned recently in a press conference that when they drafted Johnny Furby, they thought he might play 40 games with the Mad Ants. He hasn't been with them a single time yet besides one day of practice, right? So finally, the Pacers are getting healthy, and that's good for their 2-way guys who can play in the G League. This matters for the Pacers too, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think that's good for their development, right? Thomas Bryant means Freeman can go down easier. They're getting away with the center rotations that they currently have. Tristan Newton's been down all year, and Quentin Jackson with Nembhard and Shepherd back can go down. That's good for the Mad Ants, who've been struggling a little this year because they don't have the NBA guys that some other teams have. But it's good for the Pacers too, because the rule is for 2-way players, they can be active for 50 games in a season. What the NBA doesn't want teams to do is just not sign guys to contracts and instead just sign 2-way guys, play them as much as possible, cut them and sign a new one, with the intent being that would be cheaper. So they put a limit on their games. The point of the contract is more developmental based. Well, for the first 27 games of the season, Enrique Freeman and Quentin Jackson were active for every single one, right? And at some point, that could have become a problem where they run out of days and those players just have to go to the G League regardless. Don't get me wrong. It's not the end of the world if you don't have your 2-way guys, but you need that flexibility and optionality, right? Just in case injuries come again at some point. And 50th game of the season for the Pacers happens to be trade deadline day, a time where they can make moves, consider flexibility and all that kind of stuff. March 5th is the last day for teams to sign 2-way deals, though. So if you want to be as optimal as possible, you want to get to March 5th with your 2-way guys, because then you can figure out if you need to stick them in the G League all year or convert them to a pro deal and then sign someone else to a 2-way contract. So for the first 27 games, the Pacers were in a situation where they're like, uh-oh, we're using all of our active days for these guys. Now, finally with some health, 3 straight games with no active 2-way guys. And I think the key number is about 10. That's the number of games between the trade deadline and March 5th for the Pacers this year. That number is, oops, I just did the wrong column. That number is exactly 10, right? If they can get 10 inactive days for those guys, that'll help them a lot with flexibility. And so that's a good, as much as those guys helped at various times, the fact that they got any wins with those guys in the rotation is a big win. It's good for them that those guys can develop in the G League, and it helps contractually for the Pacers a little bit now. I talked about this a little bit, but James Johnson has officially passed his guarantee date amount. I tracked this for James Wiseman as well. I was going to, but then he got hurt and his contract just became fully guaranteed. But by still being on the Pacers on December 21st and not being waived for the 2-day waiver period, James Johnson's guaranteed amount, if he gets waived now, is higher than $750,000. He has been on the team long enough that his daily accrual cap hit has reached that. I explained that a little bit last week. So good for him. He earned it, right? They clearly like having him around. They signed him to 7 or 8 contracts now across the last 3 seasons. And they would have to decide by cutting him, could they actually do something with that roster spot that's better than a vet, right? He doesn't play. No one they sign would play anyway. That's up for your interpretation. I'll get into that specific detail more closer to deadline for this. But coming up pretty soon, actually, they do have to make a decision on him and his deal. And it's exactly 2 weeks. January 7th is the day that teams have to decide on non-guaranteed contracts, because on January 10th, contracts become fully guaranteed for the rest of the season. But you have to clear waivers before that day for your deal to not become fully guaranteed. Waivers take 2 days. That's why January 7th is the unofficial contract guaranteed deadline. So the Pacers could have to think about, hey, do we want some flexibility by waiving James Johnson and then bringing him back at a different point this season, or not having him at all? Now, the difference between past years and this year, right, where in past years, they didn't really need the flexibility as much, right? They've cut him on guaranteed deals 2 years in a row to facilitate trades. The Bucks trade that got them Jordan Nwora and some picks. Last year was the Siakam trade, obviously. This year, they are really close to tax. Cutting him could actually save them some money. And the other factor I would think about is, yeah, they could do what they did last year, waive him, wait a day or two, sign him to some 10 days to maximize their flexibility. They have a really interesting schedule quirk that I wonder how they attack contractually with James Johnson. And that is the Paris trip that many of you know about. They play the Spurs in Paris in mid-January, right? But they don't play very much before or after that trip. They play January 18th against Philadelphia. Then they have 5 days off, 2 games against San Antonio, and then 4 days off. So from January 18th through January 29th, they play 2 games, and they're both in Paris. They want travel to reduce jet lag before and after that. I get that. That's smart by the NBA to do that. Make those games as effective as possible. If you're the Pacers, though, would it be possible to line up some 10-day contracts for James Johnson so that you are not paying him for those 9 days that you're off, and you could save some cap that way? I don't know how that would work or what that juggling would look like. But for example, if they waive him on the 7th and then sign him to a 10-day on the 9th, and that 10-day expires after the 18th, and then they sign him to a 10-day on the 23rd, they would save 5 days of minimum cap hits. Then they could use the end time there to have a little bit more flexibility at the deadline, or be able to convert a two-way later in the season. Just keep an eye on something like that. 10-day contracts can officially be signed starting January 5th, but I think that's such a funny thing to say, because technically a team could sign a player to a non-guaranteed contract today, Christmas, and then cut them on the 5th, and it's effectively a 10-day deal. But actual real 10-day contracts that can be cut anytime for no penalty can be signed January 5th, which is conveniently right before that guarantee date. So I do think the juggling of James Johnson's contract is something to monitor. I don't know what they'll think about with the roster spot in terms of someone else being on the team completely, but with their money situation, keep an eye on that. I know that sounds really goofy and convoluted, but this is the kind of junk that I think about, and their Paris trip and their tax proximity puts them in a really, really interesting spot. One more thing I want to talk about today, because it is Christmas Day. Pacers playing on Christmas. People view this as a schedule snub. I view it as a thankful day off with family. Let's talk some Pacers on Christmas. The last time it happened. Could it happen again soon to close out this show? Before we get to any of that, though, we got to talk about FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here. Colts still in the hunt, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season NFL and NBA action with FanDuel. They're America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet on FanDuel wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up your own W this holiday season, like players who's going to score a touchdown in a game. How many points will each team score? It's thrilling. It's a blast. And not only can you bet on who wins the game, they also have first touchdown bets, over-unders, the classics, parlays, anything you like, and so much more on FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel. They're an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back here again on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Happy holidays. If you're enjoying this on Christmas Day, thank you so much. I hope you're having a fun holiday. And if you're working today, you are the best. You are literally, that sounds very hard. And thank you very much for doing that. Whether you have to or you did not have to, thank you for doing it. Second listen. What's been fun recently to me? The Nuggets have been winning the funniest games. They like claw out close wins against crappy teams, but Jamal Murray is kind of back. Locked On Nuggets could be fun. I've been enjoying some Spurs basketball recently. Locked On Spurs. Wemby played in the goofiest game against the Sixers this week, where they were like an ejection got reversed and flopping. Locked On Spurs could also be your second listen today. Let's talk about this. The Christmas slate is today, or if you're listening after Christmas was in the past, and the Pacers weren't on it. And I talked about in August that, they're the only conference finals from last year not on it. Okay. I guess that's a thing. The Timberwolves are there. Mavs are there. Obviously, the Celtics, the reigning champs, are going to be there. So what's the deal here? So I don't think the Pacers really got snubbed, right? They were a 47-win, 6 seed. The slate is, for those unaware, Spurs, Knicks. I will give the NBA credit. I blasted them for this on my ratings thing. They're putting Wemby on TV a lot, right? Get the star in front of fans. Knicks are good. Big market. Got it. Wolves, Mavs, last year's Western Conference Finals. Ant's a stud. Mavs made the finals. Got it. Sixers, Celtics. I got it when it came out. I'm sure if you gave Adam Silver truth serum, he might want the Sixers off TV. Two big market teams. Celtics were going to make it. They're the champs. They're huge. Got it. Lakers, Warriors. Steph and LeBron. Duh. They were going to be there. Check. Got it. And then the late game has to be two West teams. Keep that in mind here. And that's Suns, Nuggets, KD, huge draw. Got it. Jokic, MVP, reigning. Got it, right? I get why every team playing on Christmas is there. Pacers, again, only conference finals from last year not playing on Christmas. This is now 2 decades they have not been on Christmas, right? There are 19-year-olds, the people who voted in the last election, the most recent election, who have never seen the Pacers play on Christmas, right? Remarkable. So they certainly had a gripe not playing in the 2013-14 era of time, although thankfully they didn't have to play in those god-awful sleeved jerseys. Bring back Christmas jerseys. Get rid of city editions, go to Christmas jerseys. What would it take for this to happen, right? Because Unlike the NBA, we discussed the biggest snubs of Christmas Day. I said OKC, right? And OKC's been playing well this year. That helps. But, for me, they should want to get young stars on TV. And Shea is a young star. And OKC's really good. They were first in the West last year. And they were left off. And Milwaukee has their own gripes, although they've lost in the first round 2 years in a row. What would it actually take for the Pacers to make it? Because the conference finals wasn't enough. They'd probably have to have another season at this level, right? Because then there's staying power, there's proof of concept, and it's a team people want to watch, right? They had the IST run. They would need another year, I think, of playoff success. Miami Heat were on Christmas last year. They had made the finals 2 of the last 3 years at the time, and the conference finals before that. There was clear proof of concept that team was good. They're a bigger market. But like the Wolves, for example, they're on Christmas this year, and they just made the conference finals for the first time. What's the difference there between them and the Pacers, some might ask? The difference is that Ant Edwards has a little more star power and gravitas than Tyrese Haliburton. But if the Pacers have a good year this year again, or Haliburton ascends late in the season, or their playoff run is once again magnificent, they could steal that spot, right? That's an Eastern Conference time slot. Mavs Wolves is at 2:30 on Christmas Day, right, in Dallas. So that's a technically available slot. The Sixers would be the team everybody points to getting kicked off. I would say the Wolves have just as good of a case. Every other team, I get it for a reason or another, although the Suns kind of stink. Are people really enjoying watching the Suns right now? They're turning it over like crazy, and the Pacers just picked them apart. Their defense hasn't been very good. So there are open available slots, but next year's going to be competition to get them. OKC, and they're in the West, right? So that gives them a shot for the late game. Milwaukee, if they keep playing well or win rounds again, Giannis has some draw. Clearly, Cleveland is the best team in the league right now. They're certainly going to have a chance if they continue to play like this or do any sort of damage in the playoffs this year. So the Pacers are going to have to compete with those teams. That's 2 East teams as well to make it next year. So if you want the Pacers to play on Christmas, I personally don't know that I do, although I do get the pride factor of it for players and fans. What you should want is the following. 1, a continued Timberwolves flameout this year. They do not do very well. They seem like a very obvious removal. And 2 would be a Sixers continued flameout this year. That'd be 2 teams that I would understand being removed from the Christmas slate next year. And then the Pacers to be better than the Bucks and or Cavs. That would make them a very clear contender to step into one of these games because they'd have a young star. Tyrese Haliburton would be 25 at the time, and some other, of course, great young players. Potentially more than that if Siakam makes an all-star game like I talked about earlier and all that kind of stuff. And there would be obvious holes needed to fill and no clear teams to slide in. Obviously, some wonderful, fun contenders in the NBA. Lots of good teams and young stars right now. But I think that's what it would take is for the 2 most feeble spots on the slate, which to me is Minnesota and Philly, to slide and for the Pacers to be better than some of the other contenders to fill it. Because I think OKC is basically a lock to be playing on Christmas next year. Pacers have to be in that kind of mix to be in it. Personally, I like the day off, even though I do get, once again, the pride and fandom factor of your team being good enough and interesting enough to play on Christmas. Such as life hasn't happened since 2004. We'll see when it happens again. Thank you all for listening today on this holiday day. Back tomorrow talking about, don't know, I'll figure it out. I know it's very lazy, but I've done very poor holiday prep for future shows. I promise it'll be fun and interesting. Maybe some research projects I've wanted to dive into. Hope you guys enjoyed this show. Back tomorrow, talking more Pacers. I'm on Twitter at Tony R. East, and this podcast is there at Locked On Pacers. I'm on Blue Sky at Tony R. East as well. Thank you all for listening. Hope you're enjoying your holidays. We'll see you very soon.